Introduce yourself in a moment. I will the sticks. It looks like it's live now. Oh yeah, I got to give you control. Yeah, women like control. Make host. Okay, I'm off. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye bye. Best of luck. Bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye.
Hi everyone. Basically, I'm not able to do my class tonight at 7 p.m. So I'm doing it now. I'm going to see Horrible Histories, a performance in the Sherman Theatre in Cardiff. So hopefully I'll be able to write a report on that and I can let you know what it was like. Because I know they do horrible history themed events quite often. And I just want to talk about some archaeology that's been found quite recently, actually, because it's been quite interesting what you can find. So if I can get my news article up, because unfortunately I don't have my lovely class here, so I've got to give you the news in some way. Nothing really has been going, nothing much has really been going on with me recently. I will admit that. It's been just busy doing a lot of things, and it can be a bit draining. So one thing that I found is an article by Heritage Daily. They're quite interesting in terms of what articles they actually do. But a survey has located a boat grave from the Viking Age, and is near a village, a Viking Age village in Norway. And a study by the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research was undertaken on behalf of the National Heritage Board. And archaeologists surveyed the area with ground-penetrating radar in preparation for the construction of a major new road. So you see how a lot of archaeology lately is being found just by regeneration, and it is going to happen. We're standing on archaeology wherever we go, even when they do have things set up. Things can be sealed, like Cardiff, for example. So if I quickly just have a drink, I've had headaches lately since the sun has come out. It's really been driving me at the wall. But basically, this radar was it used the geophys method, and basically they were able to use pulses, radar pulses, to image the subsurface. And it's non-intrusive, and it allows data to be plotted as profiles and plan view maps, and you can get an image for what things are like and what happened and what was there just by this information and this technology, which is fantastic, because sometimes you don't want to destroy everything as you're going along. Ooh. So basically, this area is it is known for having a large burial ground, and it was active from 1,500 to 2,000 years ago. But this survey is now revealing a boat grave in addition to several burial mounds. And the boat measures between 8 to 9 meters. And it was placed in the ground beneath a burial mound. So I just thought that was quite interesting to talk about how they find new things. And that's quite interesting to look at this boat burial and compare it to St. Hugh, for example, because some people have different views on what that could be. Some people believe that is a Briton, some people think it's a Viking, some people think it's an Anglo-Saxon. It's really interesting. So what I'll do now is that I'll share screen to my PowerPoint on Ruperra. Now, I chose Ruperra. I have done an article on Ruperra in the past, and it wasn't an article, it was actually a post. It was a post on Instagram. So if any of you are interested in archaeology and history, I do recommend you go into my page. Is history_happens. I believe that's the name of it. Anyway, I'll be embarrassed if it's not. We'll have a look. It's history_happens. Yeah, so that's the name. If you are interested in giving me a follow, would be greatly appreciated. I believe, don't quote me on it yet, we got to over 1,000 followers the other day, so I now have 1,006 followers, and Ruperra was one of the earlier discussions on my page, actually, this being one of them. And that's Ruperra Castle, and the history of Ruperra Castle is absolutely fantastic, and we will go through that. But I just want to look at Ruperra as a whole. It's understudied. I generally do believe that this is understudied, but it provides some very good case studies. It provides some good evidence of history of South Wales and Glamorgan, but it can also tell you what else is going on there as well. And throughout history, you can see that this place had a significance with the local people and people from faraway lands. You can see how this was once a hill fort enjoyed by the locals, the Britons. You can see how then we see a Motte and Bailey being created here. And then you see an abandoned castle with loads of fantastic stories attached to it. This is an area of rich history and is screaming out to be looked at further, more closely. And that's really important to do. And this site is in a perfect location. It's really well placed. You can have connections from other people. So trade clearly was an important factor here. And this was also a place where people settled. This was a place where people lived. And then this became a place for beauty and leisure time. This is a place where the rich had actually experienced and lived here. And I definitely think that Ruperra, for example, has a very significant history because it can tell us more about the wealth and the trade and just the state of this area as a whole. And we will look at this more further. However, one thing I think that we need to look at is how understudied it is, and that is a hindrance to what we know. And I think there's definitely a potential to actually go back and look into our records, our documents, and try and see if there's anything that's been discussed. I think I did look into archaeology Cambrensis, and I did struggle to find some things, but I'm sure that if you're looking for the right thing, you eventually will find it. But more recently, LiDAR imagery has been used here. And LiDAR imagery is very important because it's non-intrusive. You can know more about the past and the structures of the past without actually disturbing the wildlife, without disturbing the vegetation. It all comes hand in hand with each other. So if I go to the discussion of this location, so if I go on my notes now, if I can get this up. Oh, forgot I. Aha. Oh, of course it would go. Oh, if I go here. I'll have to go through this way. I can't find my notes. Aha. So if I press that button, it should go bigger for me. Yay. So this definitely has some fantastic history, and it has some, to some extent, it has that hidden history, and you definitely see the evidence of early use by its earliest use known by man is the Iron Age hill fort. And apologies, annotate. The Iron Age hill fort is this here, is Coed Craig, Ruperra, and then just south from it is Ruperra Castle. And the reason why I had an interest in this is because if you actually look, Cardiff Gate is over here. So I live not far from Cardiff Gate. So basically, if you just go through the lanes, you end up where this farm is, and a farmer owns Ruperra Castle. And we will have a little bit of a discussion as to why that really upsets me with the way the farmer has treated this and how no one wants to get involved. And then you have Coed Craig Ruperra, which a lot of people actually go and have walks around. I do know some people where I live where they'll travel from all the way, say, down here, long walk all the way over there, and they walk all around this as well. So it's a really long walk, and they go all the way down. You could argue, right, that this is a lot of effort, but my friends really appreciate the archaeology and that history here, and that's something that I wish people of Cardiff knew more about, that is on their doorstep. Even where I live, there's evidence here of Romans and the medieval period, and there seems to be a lot of wealth in this area, a lot of connections, but no one seems to look into it. And it's the same for this area. If you're finding coin hoards, say, around here where I live, surely there's evidence to suggest there's some evidence with Romans having connections over here, because they would have explored, they would have travelled, and you definitely see how there's also evidence to Romans as you go further on that way. And there is going to be evidence. It is this link that shows how far the Romans got and how they're able to actually experience the landscape that they have now tried to conquer. The location, we see two sites of interest here, and that is the hill fort. It is the castle, and it's bursting with archaeology waiting to be discovered. But unfortunately, we can't really have much information to give, because not much has been discovered, unfortunately, which is the shame of all of this, and it really does put a damper on how we feel about this as a whole. But this area is just outside Cardiff, and it was home to many invaders. It was home to many locals, and trade has helped shape the community here. It's helped create the identity of people, and that's something that I have also tried to discuss as well. But the natural history, I think it's important to go for the natural history in all of this. So at 591 feet above sea level, you see how Crag Ruperra provides a wonderful view of the surrounding country, and you can see that is south towards the River Severn and north into the hills, the valleys of Macon, and is a great spot from which to see different kinds of rock and how that affects the shape of the landscape as well, how the landscape can also change because of this. And the rocks here are all sedimentary rocks, so rock layers deposited underwater, either under the sea or even laid down by nearby rivers. The Crag Ruperra is situated on the southeastern rim of the South Wales coalfield, which it stretches north to the Merthyr Tydfil and west to Llanelli and Kidwelly. And the coalfield rocks, they're about 300 million years old, and they're bent into a downfold with rock layers on the northern rim, and northern rim sloping gently southwards, and those on the south rim slowly sleeping towards northwards. And the southern rim is marked by several parallel ridges of hard sedimentary rocks. So this is like, for example, sandstone and limestone. And they're separated by parallel valleys of softer rocks like mudstone, and you have brownstone formations. And these rocks sloping northwards, you can see how they're sloping around about 25 degrees from the horizontal at the west of the track, which leads up to the summit of Crag Ruperra in the west. So brownstones lie underneath most of this reserve here. So it's in a brownstone area. It's on that Craig Ruperra is on that gap between the limestone and the brownstones. But the brownstones formation, it forms this very prominent ridge around the South Wales coalfield, and this goes west from here, and there's this forested ridge of Coed and Cosiau Whips to Craig Lisfein and Lanishan and Coed Welland, and north-east from Craig Ruperra, the brownstones continue on the other side of the Rhymney River, and you have these wooded slope of Graig Wilt and above Plasmagan, and these rocks run north past Cwmbran, and you can just see how this is a very large area, this brownstone area. And the brownstones are part of a sequence of these mainly reddish coloured rocks, and they're deposited by rivers flowing southwards to the high mountains across a wide coastal plain. And that was around about 400 million years ago. And this was during a period known as Devonian. And collectively, these rocks are called the Old Red Sandstone. So that's the prehistory in some sort of way there. You can definitely see how the brownstones is a sequence of many soft rocks like mudstones, and you see Old Red Sandstone as well. And you definitely see how when we get to Kevin Mabley, for example, this is when things start to get a little bit harder. But the lower ground of this is covered with rock debris called boulder clay or tilt, and is dumped by ice during the last glaciation, which was 20,000 years ago. And near the top of the St. Morgan's formation is a thin bed of limestone known as Ruperra limestone, and the outcrop of this rock runs close or parallel with the southeastern boundary of the reserve, known as Ruperra Castle as well. And it was also quarried locally for agricultural lime as well in this area. But Craig Ruperra is full of brownstones. It's very soft rock as well, and you definitely see how looking at Craig Ruperra, for example, is a narrow, you can see there's a narrow steep valley of Nanty Dreifion, and this valley has been eroded along the outcrop of some softer rocks which lie above the Old Red Sandstone. And as the stream itself runs on the rocks close to the top of the quartz conglomerate group. And the geology changes here from sandstone to limestone. The limestone sequence belongs to the next younger period of geological time, where is Carboniferous. And the deposits begin with the limestones. You see that Castle Coch is a limestone formation, for example, and soft mudstone is different to that, it's much older. And you definitely see how this is the Devonian period. For example, rivers and coastal plains were flooded by the sea, and these limestones mark change in the environment of South Wales, for example, and how South Wales became a shallow tropic sea. And this is really interesting because it's different to what we know it as today. So I just quickly go on this. Yes, we've got the right thing. So apologies, I've got a bit of a headache. Is that the weather? It's not good for me. It really, really does affect me. So give me a second while I have a drink. It's in a goblet. It's a goblet. See, got to be fancy. I feel quite lonely without my class, actually. Normally I have Anne talking back to me, and today is just myself. I do talk to myself on a regular, quite often. So there's nothing that's changed there. It's just, I feel like I'm talking to no one actually now. So if I get rid of this. So these are the different phases you can find on Coed Craig, for example. And you have this Iron Age hill fort at the top, at the beginning. And you can see how there is this fence all around here that would have protected the people all the way around. If I can just draw it, that was a horrendous draw. And you have these ditches here. They would have made it hard to get in as part of defence, but it can also be used to keep things in, possibly. And you can see how there's these roundhouses all inside, and you have these roads takes people to them. So very sophisticated. This is what they've been able to find here. And if you do go there, they do have boards up. The people living nearby actually paid for boards to us. Apologies. I'm so sorry. Don't know what's wrong with me. I'm not getting much sleep lately, I will be honest. And then I've just realised I've put them in the wrong order. So the next one, just swap over these two because I've got them wrong. I apologise. I did realise that it looks a bit odd, but in the Norman period, they saw the importance of this. They've kept the ditches of the Iron Age period here, and it's the same sort of shape. But they have a motte and bailey, so they would have had this fantastic hill there with a structure on the top. And this is the gate where people would have come out of. So a different type of road plan here. But they're really making use of what was left behind. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. Oh, my back. Right, so it's a completely different plan to what we know. I can't believe I've put that in the wrong order. Typical. So this was the motte is now being used for something else when we get to the 1700s. Is this summer house, and it was used right up into the early 20th century. And there's been a long period of disuse, and it's quite overgrown, and it's quite hard to imagine what it would have been like. And in 2001, there has been a restoration on this for removing the vegetation. So there's this little summer house here. It's on top of this motte, and they're still using kind of like the the Norman and the Iron Age structure. There has been Roman coins found, hoards found in the area, which is quite interesting. But that is all that's really been discussed. They don't really show any images of it. It's quite frustrating as a whole. So if I get back onto my notes. So yes, this is a long history, and this is the different phases that we see with these structures. Oh gosh, that's a dot. No, I want to go on the next page. So let's talk about Coed Craig, for example. So if I get my notes up, that I've got an awful stinking headache. There is. So if I type in, where's on my Word documents? Where did I put it under? I put it under as a Ruperra. So Ruperra. There is my notes, and then I got to go down here. Oh, is it coming out? So Coed Craig, Ruperra, there is a fantastic website as well I've put in my notes here. I believe the name of it is called the Ruperra Conservation Trust. So there's volunteering that's going on here. They talk about the wildlife, they talk about the news, the events. They have everything going on there. They really try and get the community involved. And you can also get involved with a lot of things in terms of that. So that's something that's interesting to you. Definitely give that a look into. And this is known, the Coeds Craig Ruperra, for example. It is this ancient planted woodland site, and these sites are classified as woods which should have been originally included on registers as far as back as the 1600s, and you can see how they've been felled and replanted, and they usually replant with conifer, and is a cash crop as well. So it's quite interesting. It's an ancient semi-natural woodland, and the native trees have been replaced usually by non-native conifers, but the native trees have, but this tends to push out the native wildlife, which is an issue, and is reducing the biodiversity of the woodland by destroying the habitats it held. So Ruperra's native broad-leaved trees were felled in 1920s, and there were several stages of conifer that was planting that took place during the next 70 years or so. So until the site was sold to the trust, broadleaf restoration had begun, and there's more information about that if you are able to go on their website. But during the 400 or so years, the ownership of the Lords of Tregear of Ruperra, much of the woodland was used as an extension for their estate gardens, and there was exotic plantings, particularly on the southern side. And some of these were still visible in the shape of a large specimen of conifers, but most particularly they in the cherry laurel and the rhododendron, which were only successful, so they now infest the Hill Fort area themselves. But you can see that they're really trying to restore all of this. And you can see how, I apologise, Coeds Craig, for example, when we go back, did mean to do that, the first image. This is, you can see that this was an area where more people lived. This was more of a community. This was more of a settlement. This was more where people lived. And if we go to my notes about the human settlement here, that we'll go back to. So Coeds Craig's, the earliest evidence of settlement of Ruperra was around 700 BC to 100 AD, when there was an Iron Age hill fort that was constructed along the ridge of this Coeds Craig, and you had these splendid panoramic views at the top of the ridge that would have given a site of strategic strong position. So you would have had these defensive banks, and they're still visible around the area of the mound. And there's continuing work on the site that will reveal this more clearly when they clear all of this away, when they're able to do the conservation of this area. The hill fort lies within what would have been the tribal territory of people the Romans called the Silures, who were fiercely independent and they were an independent nation. They were inhabiting the Vale of Glamorgan and Gwent and the valleys, and the Roman historian Tacitus describes them as short, dark, curly-haired people, more like those of North Africa than other Britons. And this has led to some theories that they may have been descendants of ancient pre-Celtic people of Britain, which is quite interesting. I know that there's some history and discussion about, apologies, and let me just close my window. It never clicks on the first go. Never clicks on the first go. So I know that they talked about, because this is something that's quite an interesting topic that you see online at the moment. People are trying to justify having dreadlocks and being white, and a lot of people disagree with that. And some people have been trying to justify that their ancestors have had dreads, and the Romans described people in this area to have they said like snakes in their hair. So if I plait my hair, I don't know if you can see any of this, but it can be like, oh god, I'm actually messing up on the camera, so I don't know what's happening there. But there you go. We do it like this. Oh, you can't really see it quite well. But they basically described that they had like snakes in their hair. And I feel like personally, that can represent a snake, but you can also push it up like that and it can, see, represent a snake. A snake in my hair. I don't know why people try and justify, but this could have possibly been something that our ancestors would have done with their hair to keep it neat and out of the way, and how to manage it. And this is how the Romans were able to document it, really. But I thought that was quite an interesting thing to put in there as well, because it's something that doesn't really get discussed that much. And the hill fort lies, like I said, it would have been lying in that territory of those types of people. But when you get to 1100 AD, there's this huge heap of earth for a Norman type of motte and bailey that was piled up at the top of the ridge of this hill. And at the top of the motte, a wooden castle would have stood. So Normans started off building with wood. It was just quicker. It was just faster. When you're trying to further solidify your power and push further into a land, you are going to use the quickest materials that you can use. And so stone wasn't that it wasn't suitable at that moment in time when you're trying to protect. So they had wood, which we no longer have evidence of now. We have no timber. But this would have had a good defensive outlook on the surrounding countryside, and it would have helped them gain control, and Cardiff Castle wouldn't have been that far either. And the castle, of which nothing remains, it would have been part of this Norman takeover, like I said, of southeast Wales, and this was fallen in disuse because Caerphilly Castle was created then, and it was built in 1274. But there is a theory that the Welsh could have built the wooden castle on top of the Norman takeover. There's a debate that the Welsh built this wooden castle to stop the Norman takeover. So we see there's a castle, I've forgotten the name of it, but it's near Thornhill on the way to Caerphilly, and that's a native Welsh castle. And there's some debate on whether this was a native Welsh castle using Norman-like sort of defensive techniques. And I kind of would like to go with that, because for me, that makes the most sense. But why the Welsh wouldn't just sort of do nothing? I think the Welsh would have given all that they could give as well. And so this could be evidence of that. And it's one of the three local mottes. You've got Castle Cook, so the castle that I did forget about, I did put it in my notes, Castell Mulgraig. So it's in ruins and it's located beyond the Traveller's Rest pub on the Caerphilly Mountain. So that's a native Welsh castle. And that is definitely an interesting one. Obviously, it's private land, you can't go on there, but I don't think the farmer has looked after it quite well. And it really makes me angry to actually go there and actually see that. So it's a shame. And this is a common thing, I think, that we see, is that these farmers get a little bit greedy with these, and they don't want to share with anyone, and they don't care that it's not just other people's history, but they see it as theirs. And so it goes out of disuse because they don't know how to act and give this the love that it needs. And it really frustrates me. But we also have Castle Cork as well, which was further built on as well. But that used to be an early Norman fortification. But some people argue that could be Welsh as well. But worst of the thick undergrown bramble and laurel covering the mound in 2000 had been cleared, and the trusses restored the walls surrounding the top of the mountain in 2006. And this was funding that they had from the Heritage Lottery Fund. So Cadw also got involved, and Keed Coed, and an investigation of the surface has uncovered some interesting remains. And there was even evidence of medieval occupation that had been found here. The next task is to clear the whole of the area of the Iron Age hill fort, just so they can show the defensive banks and ditches. But it's at the moment is currently covered in this overgrowth. And when you stop at the top of the mound and you admire these fantastic views, you can see how this would have been a very important position for defence that would have been held throughout the centuries. And there was an article in 1986 by Country Life, and it was pages 1 1277 to 1279. The quotes a letter from a Reverend Watkins in 1762, which had recorded this bizarre discovery of an erect skeleton in a room of 2.5 meters squared during digging the foundations of this summer house at Ruperra. And it's been speculated that this skeleton could be a certain Cadwyn, who was born in 1430, who was reputed to be the illegitimate son of William of Ruperra. But little is known of this person, and apart from this reference of this antiquarian and George Clark upon it in his work, it shows that this effect that this individual would have built and died in the long tower called after him in Ruperra. There's also reference here of the fate of a ridge of this medieval times, that an individual would have died. And in 1764 describes a 2-story summer house that was on the top of Craig Ruperra. So this may have been at the time the castle. And this could have been built at the same time before the castle went into complete ruins. But the woods have not been given over to leisure pursuits. So basically the woods that were here weren't just for the wealthy. It wasn't just for their leisure time, but there's also references to Ruperra Woodyard, which was a lot of charcoal burning was happening in the woods from the 16th to the 18th centuries. And it said there was very much a working environment here. But that's quite different to what we actually know. It's showing that this is a very significant area and something to actually focus on and look out for. But you definitely see how in July 2004, there was a geophysical survey that had been built here. They saw traces of at the site of an old chapel that could be found. And it suggested that not only the chapel, but there were several buildings that were grouped into a central place, which could suggest agricultural activity probably during the Norman times. So there is discussions on, if I go back, discussions of the community being all around here. And that's quite interesting. And it's showing that even though they have traces of this, no one's actually looking into this. No one's actually double checking to see whether people are right in the truth, whether we should believe these antiquarians, for example. So this is quite interesting. It's showing there's a significance to this area and more to be learned here about the past. And it's really, 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 really frustrating that no one else actually seems to be that actually seems to care. So if I go to the next slide now. Oh, it's playing up again, is it? Of course. So basically, this is the Motte and Bailey, the summer house, and this is all the clearance they've done. But you can see on the sides that this is being dominated by a lot of vegetation. And this is multi-period. This is important. You can definitely see how we have these old 18th century gardens here, that we see this is a place where there's an agricultural settlement or community living in this area as well. And the site is so well preserved, and it has this considerable archaeological potential as well. There is so much that we can know from this, and it just makes me wonder, where is that skeleton that has been reported to be found before they built the summer house? Where is that skeleton gone? Why is it gone? What can we learn from it? And it really does frustrate me just to actually read about all of this in whole. But this is definitely, the evidence here is showing a chronological timeline of how interesting and important this site was for defence, for living, for the structure, and how this was a functional detail that would have had some authority as well in all of this. So one thing here, this is a lovely image, an old image in the Victorian period of the summer house that was here on top, and it's much bigger than what we see it as now, and is absolutely fantastic. I just wanted to add this. There was later use of this woodland in the 16th century. Like I said, there was burning of charcoal. But this woodland is now led to plantings, which is which has caused much of a problem. The Morgans, which were the owners of Ruperra Castle, which we will talk about this soon, in the early 17th century, so the 1600s, they planted a lot of exotic trees and shrubs on the southern slopes of the castle, and as an extension. And when it basically, when they abandoned this site in the 1930s, what was controlled is now uncontrolled. These shrubs, these plants took over, and this is what the conservation is trying to do, is trying to fix and bring back the old plants that lived here, because this is something that it's just gone. It's just going. We no longer have our native plants here at all, and it's an absolute shame. So if I just quickly go back on here with my notes, it's not what I want. Setting up for our class, which is tomorrow, and we're looking at Kent's Cavern, which is interesting, but my notes are coming up for that, and I was thinking, no, I don't want that. So if we look at the gardens and summer houses, for example, so remains of what we call the if we have a look at these images here, so you have remains of what we call the lower summer house, which the lower summer house is the two top images here. And this would have led from the woodland to the castle gardens, and it was a gateway in the castle perimeter walls. And this path was cleared and relayed with a very welcome group of volunteers of the Rolls Royce in 2007. But the path runs from the front of the building and would have commanded splendid views over the eastern part of the Ruperra estate and the countryside beyond it. And the path extends the woodland onto the drive at the back of the castle, which is directly opposite a wooden door in the castle grounds, and next to a little rectangular building that's set in the wall. And the lower summer house was obviously intended as a less rulious, achieved pleasure place for the family of the castle, of the upper summer house. But like I said, careful clearance and conservation work has happened here, and there's remains of this small summer house. This consisted remains of these fantastic, pretty cobbled stone floor that we can see here. It's absolutely fantastic. There's a pattern going on here, and it's absolutely beautiful to look at, because you can see that this would have been care. You can see that this would have been a very beautiful place to be. And you definitely see how there's slabs of stone in surface, wooden pillars as well, that would have supported the roof. Whether tiled or thatched is not determined yet, but the front of the building was open, and it was a good example of this rustic style of Georgian garden design. And behind the summer house is a large area of attractive rock, and is reaching to the southern encarpment of the motte, and possibly enhanced by a landscape as well. But designers use this to illustrate this picturesque style around here. This was done for the eye. The ruins of this building show that it was constructed in the late 18th to the early 19th century, and the bricks are similar to those originally used to build the castle, and very probably made of local iron-rich clay. So originally there was wooden slats or timbers set into the bricks to support the paneling and seating inside the structure, but when the wood rotted, they were replaced later at a later date by yellow engineering bricks, and there was iron nails found at the back of the building, which would have indicated that outside was also covered by wooden panelling as well. And the upper summer house in the 17th century, so up the ridge, you climb to this spiral ramp at the top of the motte, and you'll find yourself standing at this very substantial and impressive footings of what would have been 2.5 centuries ago, a square tower with walls that were under 1 metre thick, and it was presumed to be foundations of the first summer house of the mound which was shown in 1768 on the estate map of Ruperra, but they would have easily supported the two-storey stone building described. And an area of this superstructure, for example, probably a fireplace would have been here, and this would have laid on the foundations that were constructed of bricks and mortar similar to fabric, size and composition to those used in Ruperra Castle. So you can see how Ruperra Castle is being used by being created by the same sort of brick, but the upper summer house is what we see here on the two bottom images. But the floor is important because it's showing that there's the same materials being used at Ruperra Castle to here as well. But a photograph was taken around about so basically when we get to the estate map of 1764, it describes the wall surrounding the summer house as being built sometime in the last century, which adds the puzzle of determining when the summer house was actually built. Was it in the 1600s? Was it in the early 1700s? But nothing of this early structure remained at the end of the 19th century, and it may have been used to fill the ditch on the eastern side when it was a later wooden structure was erected. But some of the bricks may have been taken from the site for reuse, possibly for the lower summer house as well. But the upper summer house, as well in the Victorian period, is still visible on the motte, and there's remains of a later summer house considering of three sides of octagonal sandstone curbing with pitch pebble flooring, with an inner area surfaced with calcite chippings, and this pebble flooring is known to have been the wooden structure that was open to the south and was set inside of the footings of the earlier building. There was a photograph taken around 1918 to 1920 that was from the west that shows the roof of the summer house. And below the mound, some local residents and soldiers from the war years still remember the building with a thatched roof intact, and they recall walls being constructed by split logs that were open on one side. And there were seats going around the inside. So this would have been a little white wooden gate at the top of the spiral path to the summit, but there's no trace of wooden wall, a roof or seats at the summer house, which that it hasn't survived, even though there's blacksmith forged iron nails and clay pipe stems and even small pot shards that's dating from that time that would have been scattered all over the site. But there's some more modern oval nails being made by the drawn wire mentioned at the indicated later 20th century repairs that was here as well. So if we quickly just go to Ruperra Castle. So Ruperra Castle. So if I can get to these are some fantastic images. So the first image that I'm showing you at the top there is from 1780, and then the next image is from 1820, and it's an engraving by Neil. And Ruperra Castle was built by Sir Thomas Morgan, who was a surveyor of the woods to the King of James I, and he would have been knighted in 1623. And as a steward of the Earl of Pembroke, he would have been one of the most powerful men in Wales at the time. And the revenue he gained from these occupations would have been having favourable marriage. It would have enabled him to complete in the building of his house in Ruperra in 1626, and this site of this earlier medieval house as well. But the castle was enjoyed by a certain individual, which we'll show here, King Charles I. He stayed here in 1645, and it was from the 26th to the 29th of July. And he then went to stay at Tretyga House or Lancaig Fawr. It hasn't been confirmed. But this was the king's last desperate effort here of gathering support in South Wales after his defeat at the Battle of Gettysburg. Gettysburg, my God, that's a different time period. The Battle of Naseby. But Sir Thomas's grandson was the host of this occasion, and the royal coat of arms was subsequently added to the decoration in the south porch. But the present public footpath from the Rudgery approach to the castle is still known as the King's Drive, because he did drive down there. But it's said that he came here. They had some lovely drinks. There was possibly some feasts going on, a really good party. This man was partying hard, and this is what this place is now known for. This is why it's so important. So you can see how this was definitely enjoyed here by the King Charles I. Yeah, sorry, I was just checking. But this is really important, because we see how this is an important structure. And this has just moved from community and possibly a community in the Norman period. But this is still moving on to a community that we're having here as well. And there's a film, Out of the Ashes, which has covered the rise in wealth and an influence of the fame of the Morgan family in the 18th and 19th century, when they had control of this building as well. But during a visit to the castle in 1684, Thomas Dinley, who was an artist in the service of the Duke of Beaufort, made a famous sketch of the south elevation, which was mentioned as the majesty of old oaks and the proud park of the deer. So this could have been a deer park as well. This is something that people would have enjoyed further, and is showing how this changed from being a very working environment to being an environment of the wealthy here as well. But there's in the Victorian and Edwardian times, there was new lodges here, which was namely Ruperra Park Lodge, and you have East Lodge and West Lodge and Iron Bridge Cottage. They were built around the castle in the Victorian era, and the Iron Bridge, which was now listed, which was recently restored by Newport City Council. They had been built in 1826 to take the new carriageway from the castle to Coed Craig, Ruperra, cross the Rumney River and Macon. But by 1900, the buildings of Ruperra were in need of repair, and this stock stable here that was just fallen downhill, and it just definitely needs a lot of love and focus. This would have been a place where there would have been large staff as well in the Victorian period. This would have had servants, a cottage. This would have been something that a lot of people would have lived. But this refurbishment that happened in 1909, there was new stables, a new powerhouse fitted with a duplicate steam-driven generators and dynos and boilers, and a new reservoir and pump house in the Deer Park. And there was even a brew house and laundry and dairy range that was built in the 1840s, and they were converted to accommodate valets, footmen, chauffeurs and garden staff here as well. But in the last 100 years, Ruperra is now the only second home of the Morgan family that would have mainly lived at Tredegar House in Newport, and there was only a small amount of domestic staff here, but these gardens were maintained to a high order, and you have Mr. Angus McKinnon, who was heading a large staff with his wife Argans, who was supervising the domestic arrangements. And when we get to 1935, the fortunes of the Morgan family had declined, and the 300-acre estate was put up for sale. However, there were no offers, and the contents of the castle were disposed of in a 3-day sale. But what was remained was taken to Tredegar House. The castle was abandoned, and the gardens were left to go wild. With the outbreak of World War II, Ruperra Castle was requisitioned from 1939 to 1946. It was a successful succession of Royal Army regiments, signals, mobile bakery, searchlights, medical corps, and a variety of troops, including Indians and Dutchmen, who were sent to Ruperra to be trained and moved on. And at the end came German prisoners of war here. On December the 6th, 1941, when a British regiment of searchlights were in occupation, there was a large fire that broke here in the castle, and it caused by a faulty electrical wiring, but the flames were visible for miles around. But in spite of the number of fire engines attending, the castle was gutted by the fire. When we get to 1956, the whole of Tredegar estates of 53,000 acres were sold off, including the now ruined castle of Ruperra. The castle has remained in the private ownership since then, and in 1982 the southeastern tower collapsed and there's been large cracks in the other three. To date, there's no suitable plan for its restoration, and approval. There has been approval despite the efforts of local people and Ruperra Castle Reservation Trust to ensure that it survived. It is Grade 2 listed by CADU and is now a scheduled scheduled monument. But in the 16th century, this was a deer park at Ruperra. There was still deer at the park in the 20th century. There was a document of 1559 that refers to Ruperra, the hill or slope of pear trees, and the exact location of this is not known, but the trust has in recent years have planted more wild pear on the site, which is hoped to thrive there and survive. But in 64, the estate map shows a formal landscape that may have dated earlier with lights through terraces, and the remains of these historic terraces may still be present. In 1699, William Wind, the famous gardener, records in a letter to Lady Bridgeman that he had moved to the trees of considerable bigness with good success at Ruperra. Splendid Edwardian gardens contemporary with the building works at the Courtney Morgan, and they're still remembered today as the head gardener. And the trust is committed to ensuring that we're putting back the plants that once was there. But in conclusion, Ruperra has a long, rich history, and it deserves the attention and focus that it needs. But more needs to be taught from the evidence slowly being found in this area. And Ruperra was strategically placed where the wealthy could enjoy this area for many activities. But before then, this was community. This is where people lived. This is where people were burning things, were surviving. This was a place of connection, a place of trade, a place of identity. There's been hoards of Roman coins being found there as well. However, I could not find the images of that. But it shows there's connections here and influence of the Romans. There's evidence of the Normans setting up defence here. There's King Charles having a party of his life here, and it shows that this is definitely an important place to think about and actually possibly have a focus on in whole. But I hope you have all enjoyed this, and I apologise for not being here this evening at 7 p.m. But I will do an article on all of the horrible histories that I will be seeing tonight, and hopefully I can feed back to you all on next week's lesson. So take care, everyone. Thank you for watching, and look after yourselves. Bye.